Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. So today video is on implementing Blazor WebAssembly CRUD sample using .NET 7 API as backend and MudBlazor UI library for UI components. So in this video we are going to do complete CRUD operation, means create, read, update, delete operation. After that we are going to implement search, sorting, and pagination on the items as well. So let me show you the application which we are going to create in this series. Okay, so this is a sample application which we are going to create. And here, if you observe, the entire UI is developed in Blazor WebAssembly. Okay, and the components, UI components are taken from the MudBlazor library. Okay, and for backend, API response is created by .NET 7 Web API. And in this entire demo, we can render the data, we can create the data, okay, and we can edit, okay, delete, okay, and we can do sorting, okay, and we can search data, okay, and we can do pagination also. Okay, complete CRUD sample we are going to implement. Okay, now first let's create the SQL table. So here I am creating a table like superheroes, which contains columns like ID, name, franchise, gender, and image URL. So very simple table. So let's create this table under your required database. Okay, so I have successfully executed the command, and if I go to my database, okay, here is my table. So creating table is done. Now let's create a .NET 7 Blazor WebAssembly application. To create any .NET 7 application, we need Visual Studio 2022. Click on Create New Project. And here I can select Blazor templates. So Blazor generally contains Blazor Server app and Blazor WebAssembly app. Okay, server means which runs at the server with the help of Signal app, and Blazor WebAssembly is a client side. Both are client single page application. Okay, so Blazor WebAssembly is like a C# code which runs inside of the browser, just like JavaScript code. Okay, so we are going to create the Blazor WebAssembly template. Select it, click on next. Okay, now let me specify the name of my project. Okay, I will first creating the Blazor WebAssembly, and let me change the solution name like .NET 7 Blazor WebAssembly, and project name is .NET 7 Blazor WebAssembly.ui. Okay, click on next. Here you can see you can select the required framework. So I am using .NET 7 O. Okay, and let's click on create. So here is our Blazor WebAssembly application. So let's run it. Okay, this is the sample design we will get when we run our application. So it is totally developed on Bootstrap UI. So we are going to remove the Bootstrap and we are going to use the MudBlazor UI library. Okay, go to dependencies and right click on package. Go to manage NuGet packages. Okay, in the browser, search for MudBlazor. Okay, so this is the package we have to install. So click on install, accept. It is installed successfully. and we can check in the packages here. Okay, MudBlazor is added. Now we need to do some initial configurations. Okay, save. Now in the imports, let me add MudBlazor namespace so that most of the components we can access directly without fully qualified name. Okay, so namespace is simply MudBlazor. Next, let me go to official MudBlazor website because we need to follow few required steps. So this is the official MudBlazor website. Click on docs and before going to docs, we have to go for get started. Okay. And here there are installation steps. We are doing manually, right? So we install the MudBlazor package. That is done. We added namespace and we have to add some CSS file references. Okay. So let's add these. Okay. Copy them and we have one and only index.html page in the www root folder. Okay, open that file and add the CSS reference link. And now let's remove the bootstrap and this app.css. Okay, just comment out them. Next, we need to add a script tag also. Copy this. So just above the closing body tag, add it. And we need to register this service, MudBlazor service. So copy this and go to program.cs file. Okay, let's add it here. Okay, and now let's run the application once again. Okay, and we can see some UI is disturbed because we have removed the CSS file, right? Now let's remove this entire existing view and let's just add a MudBlazor menu bar. Okay, so to do that, let's go to main layout.razor file. Now in this file, let me add my own design content. So first thing, we have to add few MudBlazor components like Mud theme provider, Mud dialog provider, and Mud snack bar. Theme provider to update the theme, Mud dialog provider if you use anywhere any pop-up, then this need to be added in our entire application. So it is better to register them at the root. Okay, these three things. Okay, so root means I can register them at my layout component. Okay, add it here. Okay, now I want to get rid of this content. So for that I will design using mud components. Okay, so I can use layout. To add a layout I can use mud layout. Okay, so inside of the mud layout I want to add a nav bar. Okay, for that let me go to the MudBlazor components, go to docs, components, and from here I can copy the app bar. Okay, this kind of UI I want. So let me copy this. Okay, and add here. I don't want any existing properties. Let me remove them and also remove this inner content. Okay, I just want simple navigation bar, menu bar. Okay, next. Here inside of the article elements, we are rendering our body tag, right? Body attribute, which means page level components gets rendered here. Page level components are nothing but You go to the pages, we have component slide, counter, fetch, index. So all this component data is replaced here using the Blazor syntax at the red body. So to render that body, I am going to add a MudBlazor component like mud container. Okay, mud main container. Okay, so inside of this, copy this body tag. Okay, now let me remove the existing HTML content. Save everything. Okay, run the application. See here. Now it is our MudBlazor menu component. Okay, so in the next video, we are going to create a API application because Blazor WebAssembly is a client side, right? It required APIs to display the content, dynamic content. So in the next video, we are going to create a .NET 7 Web API application. Now to our solution, let's add one more project. So go to add and create new project. And from here, we can select API. Okay, ASP.NET Core API template we have to select. Click on next. And here we need to provide the name for project. So I will name it like okay, .NET 7 dot blazor dot API. Now go to next and make sure to select .NET 7. Click on create. Okay, here is our API project. Now in API project, install Entity Framework Core and SQL libraries. So using those libraries, we are going to use database context. So go to dependencies and right click on packages. Go to manage NuGet packages and go to browse and search like EF core. Okay, here EF core and install it. Okay, EF core is successfully installed. Next, we need to install SQL, which is dependent on our EF core. Okay, so for that, here you can see Microsoft.NT Framework Core.SQL. So select it and install it. Okay, it is also installed successfully. You can see a green tick mark here. Okay, now let's go to our packages and here we can see our entity framework core and SQL libraries. So we have created superheroes table, right? So to implement database context, we need to create a table class, right? So we have to create a class like superheroes and all the table columns need to be added as property to those class. So technically that class will act as a table in our project. Okay, copy the name, table name. So first let's create the folders. First folder data. Inside the data folder, let's add one more folder like entities. So entities folder is for table classes. So let's create our table class. Okay, here is my class. Now we have to implement the properties. So let me copy these property names. Okay, let's add. Okay, and all our string properties accepts nullable values. So add question mark at the end of our string type. That means those are nullable properties. Now let's create our database context class. Okay. So database context class name, by convention, just give same as like our database name. Okay. But I will just remove the underscore. Let me remove YouTube also. Okay. So my old DB context. But in general, it is good to give our database name as our context class name. So now this is simple class, right? So, but I have created it inside of the entities, but move it to the data folder. Okay. So DB context is under data folder, table classes under entities folder. Okay. Now it is simple plain class. To make it DB context class, inherit DB context. Okay. That comes from Microsoft Entity Framework Core library. Now add constructor and define DB context options. And here type is our context class name itself. Okay. And pass the options to base class, nothing but DB context class. Okay. Now every table class must be registered inside of the DB context using the DB set. Okay. So let me register my superheroes class here. So DB set and type is our class name, class type, superheroes. Okay. So that is our simple database context class. Now in app settings.development.json, let's add our SQL connection string. Okay, by default, this JSON file supports connection string property. Okay, see here. So inside of it, let's create a property. To that property, add our connection string value. Okay. So let's add here SQL connection string. Okay, here I added my connection string. Connection string is just key value pair. Okay, let's understand them. Data source. Okay, it is a key. And value our server name. Here I am using my local DB. And initial catalog, your database name. So here I assigned my database name. Integrated security equal to true. That means take Windows authentication for authorization. Okay. And connection timeout 30 seconds. Now let's register our DB context in the program.cs file under dependency injection so that our context can be injected wherever we want. Okay. So we have to always register just above this where app equal to. Okay. So builder dot services dot add DB context. And here pass our context class as a type and options dot use SQL server that comes from NT framework core. And here we have to pass the SQL connection string. So to pass the SQL connection string, I can use builder dot configurations dot connection string. So here get connection string is the method. So to that method, we have to pass the property of our connection string name. Okay, copy this and add here. Okay, that's about DB context registration. Okay, now let me create a service file where I'm going to implement my database communication logic in upcoming steps. Okay, for that, let's create a new folder in the API project. I will name it like services. First, I am going to create a contract. Contract is nothing but the interface. Okay, so my service contract is, I will name it like I superheroes service. Okay, this is my interface. And next, I'm going to create the implementation class. Okay, that is superheroes service. Okay, and let's inherit our I superheroes service. Okay, now let's inject our database context in this service. Okay, so that we can communicate with our DB. So private read only my world DB context. Okay. Okay, let's add constructor and inject DB context. Okay, that's it for now. Now let's create a controller that represents our superheroes endpoint. For that, inside of the controllers, right click and add and click on controller and select API and select template API controller empty and add. And now I can specify name like superheroes controller. Okay, here is my controller. So I want to inject the our I superhero service into my controller. So to inject, it must be registered in DI. So register our I service superhero service in the program.cs file. So builder.services.add scope. Scope service means the object must be created only one object per request. Okay. So I superheroes service comma superheroes. Okay. Now let's inject this service in the constructor. So private read only I superhero service. Okay. And add constructor and inject I superhero service. Okay. Next, we are going to implement read operation. So read operation, we are going to work both API project and Blazor WebAssembly project. In API project, we are going to create HTTP GET endpoint. In Blazor WebAssembly, we are going to consume that HTTP GET endpoint and render the API response using MudBlazor UI components. Implement read operation. In the API project, we are going to create a GET endpoint, and that GET endpoint we are going to consume in our Blazor WebAssembly project. So to implement the read operation, I added some sample data into the table. So let's create a endpoint to fetch this data. So in our API project, go to iSuperheroes service. Here, let me define a method definition. Okay. So async. So this method returns collection of our superheroes. Okay, and let's define the method name like get superheroes async. So let's implement this method in our superhero service. Okay, so let's implement the method. So here we just use our database context. Our table is superheroes dot to list async. Okay, it's going to return the collection of data from the database. Okay, now let's create HTTP GET endpoint in our superheroes controller. Okay, so HTTP GET. Okay, I will name it like get async. So async task. Okay, so here we first fetch the result from our superhero service. Okay, so I superhero service dot get superheroes async method, and we are going to simply return the results. Okay, that's our endpoint. So let's test our endpoint using the Swagger page. So let me run the API project. Okay, here is my endpoint. Let me try to execute it. Okay, some error happening. That is because I haven't used await here. Okay, and check-in service also. We are using asynchronous call, right? We must await it. Okay. Okay. Now let's rerun again. Okay, let's check the endpoint. Okay, I am getting the response. So now let's consume this endpoint in our WebAssembly application. Okay. So first let's run our WebAssembly application also. Okay, let me add first some text on my navbar. Okay, let's close all the API files. Okay, and in the WebAssembly application, go to shade and main layout. Okay, here I will add text like super heroes. Okay, okay, I am getting now superheroes text. Let's create a model for this API response in Blazor WebAssembly application. So for that, let me create a folder like view models. So inside of the view model, let me create a class like superheroes VM view model. Okay. So let's add all the properties that are in our API table class. Okay, same response model, right? So I will simply copy the properties from this class into my view model. Okay, now let's add this namespace into our imports file. Okay, import.razor file. All the global namespace will register in this file. Okay, go to the program.cs file in our WebAssembly project. Okay, here let's add our API domain. Okay, you have to register for the HTTP client instance API domain. So our API domain is this, right? So copy the domain and add here. Next, let's create a page level component to display our API response. So in pages folder, let me create a new folder. Name the new folder like superheroes. Okay. Inside of it, let me create a Blazor component. Okay. I will name it like all superheroes. Okay. So this component to display my all superheroes. Okay. So Blazor component contains two sections of code. One is HTML, another one is C sharp. So C sharp code must be written inside of the @ code block. Okay. Let me add a route for this component. So to add a route, we can use page directive. Okay, specify page directive. It should be small p and open braces. And your path must start with slash. Okay, and I will name it like superheroes slash home. So this is my superheroes home page. Okay, let's save and run and access this URL. Okay, let me access the superheroes slash home. Okay, sorry, there is nothing at this address. Let me copy the route. Okay, superheroes. Heroes. Okay, I renamed my route. Okay, now let's check superheroes. Okay, now see all superheroes. That is from here H3 tag. Okay, that means I am able to load my page level component. Okay, now let's inject the HTTP instance. Okay, so that I can call HTTP calls. So to inject any service, you can use @inject directive, and I want to inject HTTP client, right? So HTTP client, and I will give the name like HTTP. Okay. So let me create a method inside of this code block for invoking the API call. Okay. So private async task. Okay. Get all super heroes async. Okay, so this going to return the collection of our API response. I have defined like superheroes VM, right? So list of superheroes VM. Okay, so I can call like await HTTP. Okay, and get from JSON async. And here we have to define the type of output. Okay, that is list of superheroes. Okay, and here we have to define the path of the endpoint. So what is the path of our endpoint, get endpoint? This is the path slash API slash superhero. So copy that endpoint and add it here. Okay, now once we got the response, we have to store it to some variable. So let me define a variable here to store the API response. Okay, so list of superheroes VM. Okay, all heroes. Okay, initialize it. Now let me assign API response to this method. So whenever this component loads, this method need to be called. For that, we can add page life cycle method of Blazor component, that is on initialize async. So it will be invoked automatically when the component initialized. Okay. So protected override, okay, on initialized async. Okay. So we can remove this line of code, and here I can call my get all superheroes method. And here, so this must be a void method. Okay. Because I am directly assigning response here, right? It can be a void, means simply you can write like task. Okay, let's check whether API call is invoking or not when the component is initialized. Okay, so if I reload, I am getting some exception. Let's see what is the exception. The exception is course issue. Okay, server is blocking our WebAssembly request because both are running under different port numbers, right? Technically different domains. So in our API project, we must enable CORS. So go to API project program.cs file. Here, let's enable the CORS. Builder.services.add CORS. Okay. And add options. Options dot, we need to add a policy. Okay, let me give a name to my policy like Blazor CORS. Okay, any name you can give. And here I need to define the policy. So policy, so policy dot with origin. Okay, to the with origin we have to provide our client URL so that API will allow that client. So copy the Blazor WebAssembly domain. Okay, add it here. And let's add few more methods like allow any method and allow any header. Okay, so I have created a course policy. Now let's register a middleware for this. Okay, just above authorization middleware, I can call use course. So inside of it, we have to specify the name of our policy. So copy this name and add it here. So after adding the course policy, make sure to rerun our API project. Okay. Okay. And we have to remove the slash. Okay. Don't add any slash after the port number. Okay. Now rerun the API project. Okay. Now if I check my Blazor application, now there is no error. If I go to network calls, see my superheroes API call is successful 200. So Blazor application able to consume the endpoint. Now let's render this response onto the UI by using MudBlazor CRUD component. Okay, first let's go to MudBlazor website. Okay, go to components and CRUDs. Okay, let's copy this example code. Okay, click on show code and copy this mudcard HTML content. Okay, first let's add it over here. So let me remove this h3 tag. Okay, let's check the output. Okay, I am getting card rendered, but it is too much big, right? So let's reduce its size. Okay, so here on the card, let me add width property. Okay, like 250 pixels. Okay, now little better, right? So let's try to render this card by binding our data. Okay, by looping it. So for that, let me use for each for each. Okay, and here I can use my response object, that is all heroes collection. Okay, and item. So let's cut this HTML and add inside of the for each loop. Okay, let's check again. Okay, here you can see items are card is looped. I have around 5 items, so it is 5 times looped. So let's bind the data to our card. Okay, so first thing is here in this card header avatar, I'm going to render my ID value. Okay, so to render the ID value, I can use at the rate and item dot ID. Okay, and here in the card header content, let me remove this second mud text. Okay, and in the first mud text tag, let's render the name of the superhero. Okay, so for that, at the rate item dot name. Okay, so I can remove this card header action. I don't want this. Okay, and here for the image tag, we have to bind our image URL. So to bind image URL, so here there are double quotes, right? So we have to use at the rate and open the circular braces. So inside of it, we can write C# expression. So I am going to add item dot image URL. Okay. So here in the mud text body, let me render the franchise name. Okay. So franchise at the rate item dot franchise. So let's duplicate this tag and render the gender. Okay, gender. So I binded all my properties from the response. I don't want these action buttons currently. Let's remove them. Okay. So if I save and run and now check the output. See, now our API response is rendered onto the MudBlazor card component. but they are coming one after another, right? Sorry, one after another in a single column. So let make them to render side by side. Okay. So for that, let me create a wrapper element. So to create a wrapper element in MudBlazor component, you can use mud container. Okay. If you want to use simple div also, that is fine. Okay. So let's render this entire for each loop inside of it. Okay. So if I check, there is much change, but a little bit spacing on the right left hand side. Okay. To make them side by side, I can add so class here C, capital C. This is MudBlazor class, not a normal HTML class. So to that I can provide MudBlazor styles like C flex. Okay. I'm applying a flex. See, now the components are coming one after another. Much better, right? But on the top, there is no space, and between the chords, there is no space. So to apply the space, I can use one more class like MA, margin in all sides. Okay. So I will give 4, means 16 pixels. Okay. So let's check now. Now I got top margin, but there is no spacing between the chords. So for that, we have to apply a class on our mud card directly. So for that, I can use class, which is mud library class. Okay, and here I can specify margin. So on each card right hand side, I need some margin. Okay, specify like MR2. Okay, so if we check, okay, we are getting nice space between them, right? So from this, we completed our read operation. We created a API and we consumed that API in our Blazor WebAssembly class, and we rendered them on the Blazor WebAssembly application using MudBlazor card component. Okay. In the next video, we are going to implement create operation. Okay, where we will add a HTTP post endpoint in the API project, and in Blazor project we are going to create a form for adding the new component. So to implement create operation, we need to create HTTP post endpoint in the API project, and next we need to add a form in the Blazor WebAssembly application. So using that form, we have to add a new items. Okay. Now go to API project, and in the services, go to iSuperhero service. Let's define a method definition for creating the item. Okay. So let me create. So it will going to return the newly created item as a return type, and I will name it like create superheroes racing. Okay, this is my method definition. Let's implement this definition. So go to superhero service and implement the method. Okay, this method will have superheroes as a payload. So we have to insert this new item into the database. For that, we can write logic like my old DB context dot superheroes dot add. Okay, so here we are adding our new item to the database context. So once adding any items to the context means we changed the state of the context. So when the state of the context is changed, at the time if you call dot save changes async method, it will update the all the modified state available in the DB context. So now we have to write like await my old DB context dot save change. So it's going to insert our data into the DB. And finally, let me return my newly created item. Okay. Now let's create a HTTP post action method. Okay. And in that action method, let's consume this create superheroes async method. So go to our controller. Let me add public async task by action result post async. Okay. Since it is a post method, action method, right? It should be decorated with the HTTP post. Now let's consume our newly created service method, that is create superheroes async. Okay, await superheroes dot create superheroes async. Okay, that's it. That is our action method, and our post async method should read the form data or the user posted data. Okay, let me create a input like superheroes, new superheroes, and pass the payload to our service method. Okay, let's run the application and test in the Swagger page whether our newly created endpoint in that page. Okay, here post method is available now. So now I can consume it. Okay, let's close all the service files. Now let's go to our Blazor WebAssembly application. Okay, so to display the collection of items, we have created page level component like all pages superheroes, right? So to display the create form also, let me create a page level component. So inside of the superheroes folder, let me add a razor component and let's name it like add superheroes. Okay, so let's configure route for this component. So I can use @page directive and double quotes and path always start with slash. Okay, and superheroes slash add. Okay, let's try to access this endpoint and check whether we are able to get this add superheroes message or not. So go to add. Okay, here we can see add superheroes. That represents we are successfully accessing our new Razor component. Now in this page, we have to create our form. So to create that form, we are going to use the MudBlazor UI components. Okay. So first to work with forms. Okay. First we need to render the component like, let me remove this H3 tag. Edit form component. Now inside of this edit form component, let's add a card component. Okay. Mud card component. So I can specify mud card. Okay. And I can add mud card content. So in this mudcard content, let's add our form fields. So let's check what kind of fields we will have. So let's go to our response object. This is the response object we created, right? So if you observe here, we have to create a text box for name, text box for franchise, and we are going to add a radio button component for gender, and franchise I am going to add a drop down component. For image URL, I simply use text box component. Okay, so first let's add the mud component fields. So go to MudBlazor website. Okay, go to components, and in the components go to forms and inputs, and go to forms inside of it. So let's create a form something like this. Okay, so we are using edit form support, right? So let's check this sample. So to display a text box, we have to use mud text component. Okay, so let's copy this and add it here. So I can remove this hypertext character, and I will change label like simply a name. Okay, and if you observe here, there is a bind dot value. So at the rate bind dot value enables two-way binding, means we can pass the value to the text field from our C# code, or we can read the value from the HTML into our C# code. Okay, that is two-way binding. And for attribute represents the field in the model. So what is this model means? Edit form must register with a model. Okay, form binding model. So first let me define the model here. So I will define model like superheroes VM. Okay, superheroes form model. Okay, initialize it. Okay, now I have created the model, right? So I can map this object with the @model attribute on the form. Okay, @superhero model. So I binded my model. So now I can access our variable name is superheroes, right? Superheroes model dot name. Okay, here also we need to change superheroes model dot name. Okay, now those red lines are gone, right? Okay, let's check the output. And here is small correction. I added before the model, right? I should not add it. Okay. Now if I check again, see, here is my text box, right? Okay, let me add image URL as well. So let me duplicate this mud text field for image URL. Okay, now we have to change the label like image URL, and bind value must be changed to image URL property. Okay, and here for also change to image URL property. Okay, let's check. So we are getting two text fields. Now let me add a drop down for displaying the franchise. So to go for a drop down, go to select. Okay, let's copy one of this kind. Let me copy this. Okay, let me copy this. I will copy this top mud select and add it next to our image URL text box. Okay, let's change label to gender, sorry, franchise. For text field, we used @bind value, right, to enable two-way binding. Same thing, we can add it to our mud select also, or drop down also. Okay. So here let's change property to franchise. Okay, here there are selected options, right? So now what I will do, I will change these values to DC and Marvel. These are my options. But I want to display in caps. So for that, I will extend the element. Okay. I will remove this self-closing tag. Okay. Now I don't need last option. Save it. Now check it. Okay. Now I got drop down as well. And finally, I need text box. Sorry, radio button group. Let's go to MudBlazor and look for radio buttons. Here is the radio buttons. Okay. So let's select one of the sample. Okay, let me copy this and add it here. Okay, and first let me give the options. Okay, first thing is for two-way binding for text field and drop down use value bind, right? For radio button, it should be @bind selection option. Okay, so here it is bit different for radio button group. So here let me render my superhero model dot gender. Now let me give the values, option values like male, okay, male, female. Let's remove this option and here let's give others. Okay. So here there is some disabled condition. Let me remove all these things. Okay, let's check it. Okay, we got name, image URL, franchise drop down, and gender radio button. Okay, to display better UI, whatever image URL we add, let's preview it. Okay, so for that, let's add one more mudcard content. Okay, mudcard content. Okay, here I want to display the image preview. So for that, go to MudBlazor. So look for image section. Okay, and let's try to get this preview. Okay, so copy this entire thing and add it here. Here I can directly give like object dot fit. Let me give like cover, and here in the src I will bind my superheroes model dot image URL property. Okay, so that whenever in the text field we add any URL, that URL gets previewed in this div. Okay, and let's specify there are height and width, right? So let's change width to some 250, little bit smaller. So let's check. Okay, let me remove the alt tag for now. It is showing some breaking image, right? Okay, now we have a box here, but the box is coming at the bottom of the form, right? So what I will do, I want to divide this form on left hand side our form fields and right hand side I must see the preview. Okay, so for that what I will do, on the mud card let's add a class property and apply flex direction. Okay, now we are getting result what we expected. Okay, let me decrease the size of the container also. Okay, for that let's add mud card with width property. So that is like I will give like 800. Okay, now here you can see the width of the card is reduced. Okay, but I want to center the content. So I can use justify center. Okay. Okay, now the content is moved to the center, but I want to display the card into the center, entire card. So for that, the edit form, let's wrap around a either some div or a mud container. Okay, here I will wrap it around a div. Okay, so let's move this entire thing into this div and let's add classes like deflex and center, justify center. Okay, let's check. Now the card is centered. Let me give some margin top. So on the div itself, I can give like empty 6. Okay, so we got some margin. Now let's give some spacing between these fields. Okay, for that on each field, let's add a class and give margin top like 2. Okay, let's add a button here. Okay, for that go to MudBlazor and go for buttons. Okay, and let me copy one of the button here. Okay, let me copy this primary button. Add it here and give some margin top. Okay, and button label like add. And we have to define the button type. Okay, so button type equal to, it's a form submit, right? Button type dot submit. Let's check now. Okay, I got the button. Now let's add a form heading. Okay, for that, let's add one more div just like this. Okay, closing div. Now inside of this div, let me add a MudBlazor chips. Okay, let's copy one of these chips. Okay, add it and let's give h3 tag or h4 tag. Give h3. Okay, and give a label like create a superhero. Let's check now. Okay, now our form looks better. Now on clicking the button, our edit form can listen for some events. In that, on submit is one event. Okay, on submit. So this on submit must be registered with a method for posting the form data. So let me create a method here. Okay, async task create superhero async. Okay, let's map our class with our on submit event. Okay, now let's implement our logic to post API call. Okay, so that is like await. So to invoke the HTTP call, we need HTTP instance, right? So inject the HTTP instance using inject directive, and I want HTTP client instance, and I will name it like HTTP. Now I can use this HTTP post JSON async, and the return type is, we know from API it is superheroes returning, right? So specify the VM and path and the payload. Our payload automatically stored into the superhero form model, right? Because this is binded to our form. So simply pass the superhero model. So here API is nothing but the same API but post request. So I can copy this route and add here. Okay. Now after saving, I want to navigate back to my home page. So for that we need to inject one more service, that is navigation manager. So at the top, at the rate inject navigation manager. Okay, manager service. So I can use this navigation manager service to navigate from one component to another component. So navigate underscore navigation manager dot navigate to and specify the route. So our all superheroes component route, copy the route and add here. Okay, so we are done with total logic for creating the form. So now I want to come to this form from the home component. Okay, now in this home component, I want to add the add button on the top of these cards. Okay, so for that, go to our all superheroes component. Here inside of the mud container, let me add my button. Okay, So go to the buttons and go to fab buttons. Okay, like a rounded buttons. So let me copy this. So add it here, and I don't want icon. I just want to display the text. Add label, like add. Okay, now check. But the add button is coming starting of the cards. But I want to this add button on the top of the cards. Okay, for that what I will do, let me wrap around individual divs. Okay, move this content inside of this div and add some styles to this div. Like now let's add one more div and move the for each content inside of the div. Okay, now let's remove the deflex from the top of the mud container and add like individual classes. Okay, now let's check. Okay, now it is coming on top of the cards, but there is no spacing between them. So let's add margin like MA in all direction 2 pixels. Okay, so now let's check. Now I am getting space between the card and the add button, but I want add button must be centered. Okay, for that I can use justify center. Okay, let's check. Now it is little better. Now on clicking this button, I need to navigate to my add superheroes component. So let's register a click event for this button. Previously for form we didn't register any click event for button because already we are using form button inside of a form. So there is no need to explicitly register the click event. On clicking the button itself, on submit form event gets raised. But here it is not a form, simple button. So we need to register the click event. So to register the click event on click, okay. See all are small, okay. On click at the rate on click. So to this method, I will write a logic, simple logic, okay. So at the rate and open circular brackets, okay. And I will use arrow function so that I am going to write my simple logic inside here directly. Okay, now to navigate, we know we have to inject the navigation manager service. So inject navigation manager, okay, underscore navigation. Okay, now I can use this service directly. If you don't create like this, you have to create a method in our at the rate code block. Because since it is a single line of code, I am using arrow function directly on the on click. Okay. So navigation dot navigate to specify the route of our add superheroes component. Okay. Semicolon. Now let's check. Okay, if I click on add button, see, I am able to navigate to my add superhero component. So let's add a new superhero. So let's open inspect element to check the network call. So okay, let's add new superhero. Let's add image URL. Okay, after adding image URL in our text box, if you focus out, see, nicely preview is coming. Okay, now let's click on add button. See, we navigate back to our home page component, and if you see the network call, first call is our post call, and here is our payload, and in the preview, here is the response. Okay, and we successfully navigated to our home page after saving it, right? But if you observe, cards are shrinking, right? Reducing their size. But I want to go the cards into the next line. Okay, if the additional cards are adding instead of shrinking. So for that we can change the CSS in our all superheroes component. Okay, so here let me add a class like Flexwrap. Okay, and add justify center. Small correction, it is Flexwrap. Okay, now check. Now see, the content is centered, any additional cards going down, but there is no spacing here, right? So to give the spacing around all sides, so MR change to MA, all sides, okay? Okay, now display also good, right? And we also successfully completed our create operation, okay? So we are going to implement update operation. So in update operation, we are going to create HTTP put endpoint in API project, and we are going to add a new form for update. To implement the update operation in API project, we have to create two endpoints. One is get endpoint by ID value, because we need to fetch the data of the which we want to update, right? For that, we need to create a HTTP get by ID endpoint. And next endpoint, that is HTTP put endpoint, which is update endpoint. Next, in Blazor WebAssembly application, we have to add the update form. Okay, in our Web API project, go to our iSuperhero service file. Here, let me add a method definition first, like task, and it's going to return single superhero item. Okay, get superheroes by ID. Okay, and it should have input parameter like integer ID. So let's define this method, implement this method in our iSuperhero service controller. Okay, let's implement. So here I can write like await my old DB context superheroes table dot find. I can use first default async. Okay, and I can query here. Okay, so it will create a where condition based on our ID parameter. Now let's create a get endpoint in our controller. So go to the controller. Let's create one more HTTP get endpoint. Okay, public async task iaction result get async. I'm going to create a overloaded method. Okay, it will contain integer ID value. Okay, and HTTP get. Since I have two get endpoints, right? I need to specify some route. Okay. By default, controller supports only one action method without route. If we have more than one, then we have to specify the route explicitly. So here I will specify a route like with ID to get. Okay. So here open flower brackets and specify the input parameter value. Here ID I specified, right? Same value I have to give here. And I can specify its type as well. Okay. Now where result equal to my superhero service get by heroes async ID. And finally, okay, and I must await it. Okay. Okay, here in the Swagger we can see our get by ID endpoint. Let's try out. Okay. I will give like ID 1. Okay. So if the record exists, it will return response. See, I am getting the first record. Okay, that means we have successfully implemented our get by ID endpoint. Now let's implement our HTTP put endpoint. For that, let's define a method here. So task superheroes and update superheroes async. So superheroes payload. Okay, superhero. Okay, this is my method. So let's implement it. Let's implement. Okay. So for add, what we have done, we used add method, right? So for update, I can use update method. My old DB superheroes dot update method and pass our payload. So context changed, we have to call the save changes async method. Since it is a async method, right? We have to await it. And finally return our updated superhero. So that's it. We are done with our logical implementation. Now let's create the HTTP put endpoint. So public async task I action result, okay, and put async, and it should contain the payload. So superheroes update superhero, okay, and the method must decorated with HTTP put, okay. Now where result equal to await superheroes dot update superhero, okay, and finally return the output. Okay, in the Swagger we can see our update endpoint. Now we have to add a update form in our Blazor WebAssembly application. Okay, go to our Blazor WebAssembly application. So in the superheroes, let's create a new Blazor component. Okay, name it like edit superheroes. Okay, now what we can do, most of the logic we can copy from our add superheroes component. So let me copy the entire code and we will modify it. Okay, so first thing we have to change the route. Let's change it to edit. Okay, we need HTTP and navigation also. Let's update the create superheroes to update a superhero. Okay, and remaining form content will be same. Okay, here button label I can change to update. And here, instead of create superheroes async, we can write it like update superheroes async. And here put as JSON async. Okay. And endpoint is same and navigation logic also same. So we have done most of the changes. Okay, let's map the appropriate on submit event method. Okay, now we have to populate our form, right? So we have to fetch ID value. How we can fetch means in the route we can fetch the ID value. So let me add a dynamic placeholder in the route, flower brackets, and specify the ID and its type. Okay, to read this ID value in our component, we can use normal property. Okay, so private int ID, and it must be decorated with parameter attribute so that it will read the value from the route. Okay, okay, we should not create private, it should be public when we decorate with parameter. Okay, now let's invoke the get API call. So get API call must be invoked when the component is rendered. So we know a lifecycle method on initialized, right? So override. Okay, here I can call my get by ID async endpoint. Okay, so here what I will do to the superheroes model, I have to bind the API response. Okay, so await. So override protected, override async task. Okay, await underscore HTTP and get JSON async and type is our superhero VM. Okay, and here we have to prepare the dynamic route because we have ID value to pass, right? So to generate the dynamic route, we have to use dollar and the double quotes. And here pass this API slash ID, our endpoint. Okay, open flower brackets and pass the ID value. Okay, that's it. We are done with our edit form logic. Now in the all superheroes component, we have to add the edit button on each item because we have to edit means we have to navigate, right? So we have to add the edit button. So for that here in the card, I will add one more section like mud card actions. Okay. Action represents where we can render the buttons. Okay. So here let's add a edit icon. So go to MudBlazor website, go to components and check for icons. Okay. So here is the code for icons. So let me copy any one of these. Okay. And add here. And here I have to change like edit. Okay. And change title also like edit. So let me create a on click event. Okay. On click, it should be at the rate on click. Okay. And here what I will do on clicking, we have to navigate to our edit form, right? So I will write a logic similar to our this one. Okay. Using navigation. But here our route should be dynamic. Okay. And here it should be edit slash and my dynamic value I can get from the item.id. Okay, that's it. Let's run and test our update operation. Okay. Okay, here you can see your edit buttons, right? So let inspect element. Okay, go to networks. Okay, let me edit this item. See, I am able to populate the data into my update form. If you check the network call, see here, we are getting the response. Get by ID API. Okay, now let me update the name like the first Avenger Captain America. Okay, now click on update. And now here you can see the name is updated. And if you observe the network call, here is our put and here is our payload for update. And here you can see our data is successfully updated and it is also displaying on our home page. Okay. That means we are successfully done with the update operation. Next, we are going to deal with delete operation. So, to implement delete operations, we need to create delete endpoint in our API project. And in Blazor WebAssembly application, we are going to show a pop-up before deleting the item. So that pop-up we are going to consume from MudBlazor components. Okay, let's go to API project and iSuperhero service. Let's define a method where we are going to implement our logic for deletion. Okay, so method definition like task int. Okay, I'm going to just return the deleted item ID as a response. Okay, delete superheroes async and it will have ID of the item which we want to delete. Okay, so let's implement the method. So here let's implement delete logic like my old db context dot superheroes and where id equal to id dot delete execute delete async. So this is a method that is available from EF Core 7. Okay, execute delete async. So what is the benefit of using this means in previous version or below to EF Core 7 to delete any item, first we need to get the item and then that item need to be add to a method like remove. Here to add we are using add, right? For delete we will use remove. Like that we need to remove and then we have to call the save changes. So here two db calls are involving, like first we need to fetch the existing item, next we need to remove. So instead of that we can call this single line of code, means single db call. Okay, so let's revert this and here it must be awaited. And finally, let me simply return the ID that I am deleting. Okay, now let's implement our HTTP delete action method. Go to controller, public async task, iAction result, delete async. Okay, it should have input parameter like ID and it should be decorated by the HTTP delete. And I want to add a route because I want to receive the ID, right? So I am going to define the ID in the route itself. Okay, ID, and I can specify its type like integer. Okay, now I can simply call our method delete method and pass the ID and finally return the response. Okay, in the Swagger, I can see my delete endpoint. Let's implement our delete logic in our Blazor WebAssembly application. So close all these files. Just go to Blazor WebAssembly. So I mentioned, right, for deleting, I want to display the pop-up. But now for deleting, I no need to create a page level component. Okay, I want to create a component, normal component, okay, where it can be used in any component like a child component. Okay, so for that, let's create a new folder like components. Okay, inside of it, let me create a folder like superheroes. Okay, now let me create the normal razor component, but we will not specify any route here. Okay, let's give name like superhero delete pop-up. Okay, create it. Now let's add MudBlazor dialog component. So go to components and check for dialog. Okay, so if you click here, see, something like this dialog I want to show before deleting an item. Okay, so this is the HTML content for dialog. Okay, let me copy this and add it over here. Here it is expecting some submit and cancel buttons, right? So let's create methods. For now, let's create empty methods. Okay, private void cancel. Okay, and another method here, button like OK, but I want to this button label as confirm delete. Okay, so on clicking this confirm delete, we should invoke our API call. Okay, so let me create a one more method like private async because I am going to invoke the API call in this method. Okay, task confirm delete async. Okay, let's configure this method to this button. Okay, let's change the dialog content like are you to delete this item. Okay, now to get control over this dialog component, we have to use a cascading property. Okay, that is, so let's define the cascading property like mud dialog instance. Okay, and I will name it like mud dialog. Okay, and it must be cascading means it should be decorated with the cascading property attribute. That means it will comes from the top. Okay, now using the mud dialog component, I can implement the cancel logic like mud dialog dot cancel. Okay, that will closes the pop-up. Okay, now in confirm delete async, we have to invoke the HTTP call, right? So we have to inject the HTTP instance. So at the rate inject HTTP client, okay, underscore HTTP. So here I am going to invoke like await HTTP from JSON, okay, and I am going to specify like integer the API response, okay, and here we have to specify the URL, but URL should be dynamic because it has ID value to be added to the URL, okay. So just like our edit component, here we have a URL, right? Get by ID, same way I can add it here, but we don't have a ID property here. So let me create a property like ID, okay. So public int ID, okay, and it should be decorated with parameter. Why we should decorated this with parameter means on invoking this component, the parent component can send the values. In that value, ID is one of the variable, okay. Now after successful delete API call, we have to close the pop-up, right? So for that mud dialog dot close, okay, and to this close we can send like a dialog result dot okay, means successfully we are closing. Okay, that's the logic we required in our delete pop-up component. So let's go to our all superheroes component. Okay, from here I want to invoke the, so let me create a delete button here. So copy our edit button. Okay, paste it here and change it like delete, and change the title also delete, and I want to display this delete icon in red color. So color equal to color dot primary, okay, and here I am going to use arrow function but not this logic, okay. Let's remove this logic, okay, and let's create a new method, okay. So private async task delete superhero async, and it should have ID value as a input parameter, okay, the item we want to delete. Okay, now to invoke the dialog component, we have to inject the iDialog service. The rate inject and iDialog service. So underscore dialog service. And one more thing, to use this MudBlazor dialog, we have to add dialog component at the root level. Okay, so if you recall, initially, while configuring main layout, we have added mud dialog provider, right? So this should be registered here, or else we will get errors. Okay, that is one of the key thing need to remember when we are using dialog service. Okay, so now using the dialog service, I can show the dialog. Okay, for that, dialog equal to await underscore dialog service. Okay, dot show async. Okay, so here we have to pass the type of our dialog. Since our Razor component is superheroes delete pop-up, right? Same thing here we can pass. Okay, superhero. Okay, here I am not able to get the intelligence, right? That is because we haven't registered this newly created folder structure hierarchy in our import.razor file. So let me create at the rate using .7 Blazor WebAssembly UI components superheroes. Okay, now if I try to access the type of my dialog pop-up, see now it is coming. Okay, and first parameter is like the heading to the component. Okay, delete confirmation I will heading. Okay, and second, there are many overloaded methods where we can pass the parameters, dialog parameters. Why we should pass the dialog parameters means here I have to pass the ID value, right? Deleted item ID value to invoke the delete endpoint. So those ID value I can send using the parameters. Okay. For that I can create new dialog parameters. Okay. It is like a dictionary where we can add our property name, okay, and the ID value. Okay, this property name here must match with the parameter property name value. Okay, now I can pass the parameters. Okay, now let's wait for the click events of the dialog pop-up. For that, what I can do means where result equal to await dialog dot result. Okay, any click event. Here, this line of code opens the pop-up. But after clicking either close or confirm delete, this is the line, we'll wait for it. Okay. And if result dot, sorry, result dot cancel. So if we click the cancelled button, we are calling cancelled method, right? In the delete. So if we click the cancel, here it will come true, cancelled true. If we not clicked cancel, it will come false. So we are checking for the false condition. That means we clicked the delete confirm button. Okay. So now here in this if what we have to do means after deleting the item, we should delete the item from this collection also because we need to refresh our UI, right? Instead of page reloading, we must delete our item from this all heroes collection. Okay. So all heroes equal to all heroes where ID not equal to item deleted ID. Okay. But here after opening the pop-up, okay, our execution thread will be paused. Okay. And after clicking any button, it again resume execution. At that time, it will lose the state of the component. Okay. So if we remove also, UI doesn't affect. Okay. So to affect the UI, we have to call a default method of Blazor that is state change. Explicitly, we are saying state is change. So when we call this method, our state get refreshed. Component state get refreshed. Okay. So that's it, and register this method with our delete button here instead of the arrow function. Okay, and pass item dot id. Okay, let's execute. Okay, here I have to specify the semicolon. Okay, let's check. Okay, now we are getting delete button also, but I want red color, right? So here I want to use not primary. I have to use error. Okay, now it is in red color. Now let's try to remove the item. Okay, let's try to remove this item. See, I am getting confirmation method. Okay, if I click on cancel button, nothing is happened. If I reload also, nothing is happened. Okay, so let's open inspect element. Okay, now click on delete. Now click on confirm delete. See, the item is gone. Okay, and if you check the network call, see, delete endpoint is invoked. If you refresh also, you won't get that deleted item. Okay, that means API call also successful. Okay, from this we can understand we have successfully implemented the delete operation. Next, we are going to implement sorting. Okay, okay, we have around 20 items. So we are going to implement the sorting. Okay, so I am going to implement sorting by ID and the franchise values. Okay, go to our API project, and in the superhero controller, here we are getting the collection, right? So this must be modified. Now we should have query parameters for sorting. Okay, for that let me create a DTO. Okay, so data transfer objects. So let me create a new folder like DTOs and add a class like superhero filter DTO. Okay, superheroes filter DTO. Okay, so it contains properties like public string, and I want it as an optional sort. So the sort property can have column name as a value. Okay, which column we want to sort. Okay, and another property like order by. Okay, order by ascending or descending, that value will be assigned to this variable. Okay, now let's input this object into the controller. Okay, superhero filter DTO, superhero filters, and add attribute like from query. Okay, query parameters. And now we have to change our service file also, right? So first go to iService file. Okay, and add a input payload like superhero filters. Okay, so let's copy this and go to our service file. Okay, where is our get all method? This one, right? Collection. So now I have to add the filtering on the superheroes query. Okay, so to do that, instead of calling directly async here, okay, what I will do, I will use like as queryable. As queryable means dynamically we can add n number of filters to the query before executing against the database. Okay, so here I am name it like super heroes. Okay, remove the await. Okay, now I will check like if string is null or empty of. Okay, superhero filters dot sort. Okay, and string String is null or empty of superheroes order by. I'm checking both are not empty. At the time, I want to add a dynamic condition on my query, superheroes query. Okay, internally I will add other if condition like if superheroes filter dot sort dot to lower equal to id means filtering by id column. Okay, and then superheroes filter dot order by dot to lower equal to descending. Okay, if this is the case, then my query will be superheroes. Okay, order by descending and the property. Okay, with the id I am adding the order by query. Okay, else I'm going to copy this entire if. Okay, id and descending. In that case, I can use order by. Okay, I'm dynamically preparing the query. Same way, I can check for franchise as well. Okay, instead of ID, sort by searches for franchise. Okay, franchise. Okay, now here I have to change order by descending on franchise column. Here also we need to change. Okay, and finally we can call toList async on superheroes query. Okay, superheroes dot toList async. Okay, so here at the async, whenever this method is called, then only query execute against database. Till now, till from here to this if condition, it is iQueryable means just we are preparing the query, not yet executed against the database. Okay, and it should be awaited. Okay, let's test it using Swagger first. Okay, here I forgot to input the data superheroes filter. Okay, now let's test it. Okay, now I got filters. So for now, without data, let's try to execute. See, without filters, I am getting all data as expected like old. Okay, now let's give ID and sort like descending. Execute. See, now ID values with a decreasing order. Sorting is working fine. Okay, now let's apply the sorting to our UI application. Okay, let's close these files. Go to our Blazor WebAssembly application. Okay, open all superheroes component. Okay, now first let's add a drop down here on top of the left hand side corner. Okay, so for that in this mud container, let me add a new div. Okay, so div, and I can use this deflex and margin class here. And I don't want to content to be centered because in this div I am going to render sorting dropdown, search text box, and pagination in upcoming steps. Okay, so I want to divide this div into three parts. So in MudBlazor to divide, we have to use MudGrid. Okay, MudGrid. So mud grid contains mud items. Okay. Now I can specify the width of this uh, item like MD4. Okay, 4 sections. Totally one row is divided into 12 sections. So in that four units, I want to display my drop down. So here we have already using drop down, right? So let's copy it where we are using drop down. In the add component we are using, right? Is the select. Let's define the values. Okay, drop down values like ID by descending. Okay, so display it like ID by descending. Okay, so here I am going to specify like ID by ascending. Okay, so ID by ascending. Let's create two more options. Okay, for franchise. So franchise by descending, franchise by descending, franchise by ascending, franchise by ascending. So here I want to listen for the value change of the dropdown, because whenever dropdown changes, I need to invoke the API call, right? So here instead of directly using the bind value, what I'm going to do means, let's remove this bind value. Okay, and I'm going to listen for a event like value changed. Okay, so value change. So let me create a method. Okay, like private async. Okay, task do sorting async. Okay, this is my method. So let's register this method here. Okay, and this method can receive the drop down selected value. So I can add a input parameter like string value. Okay, now let me create a property to store the sorted value. Okay, so private string sorting. Okay, now I will assign my value to sorting key. Okay, now let me create a one more method to get the sorting actual values. Okay, so private, I'm going to use tuple return type. Okay, so it will return string of sort and string of order by. Okay, this is tuple return type in C#. Okay, get sorted values. Okay, and I will check for the string is null or empty on my sorting key, because to this property we are assigning the sorting value, right? So if that is has value. Okay, and finally if that is empty, then we simply return empty values. Okay, string dot empty comma string dot empty. Okay, now here I am going to do conditional checks like if sorting sorting key dot to lower is equal to our drop down values, we have to compare. So where is my method here, right? So if it is equal to this one, then I am going to return ID and descending value. Okay, So else if. So I'm going to copy this if here. I'm going to copy this else. Okay. Now ID by ASC, then it will be ascending. So here like franchise. Okay. Then here we will return franchise and descending. Okay. Here franchise and ascending. So it will be ASC and franchise. So this method is to just get the sorted values. Okay. So now I can use this method here in this API call method. Okay. So now I have to make our URL dynamic, right? So in URL, okay, initial URL, let's copy this here, okay, and where sorting params, okay, and our method get sorted values, okay. So from this here we will prepare again our dynamic URL, okay. So URL, a question mark, and we have to add queries, right? Sort. So please copy the property names from our superhero filter DTO, okay. Sort equal to sorting params dot sort, okay, dot empty ampersand, okay. It is non-nullable, no need to have a question mark here, okay. And here let's add another query parameter like order by, okay. So let's do order by, okay. And here sorting params dot order by. Here anyway we don't get any null value, no need to check this condition, okay. And we have to pass the URL, okay. Let's check the output. So once again go through our code what we have done. We added drop down, and drop down is registered with value changed event, and it is mapped to do sorting async method. So do sorting async method, we are assigning the sorting key, and in the API call we changed the URL to make dynamic, and now we have to invoke the API call from here because sorted values must be invoke API call, right? So here await get superheroes async. Okay, now let's check. So by default there won't be any sorting. Open network call. Okay, so refresh the page, and here see query parameters are empty, but I'm getting all the data. Okay, so now here is my drop down we added for sorting. Okay, so let me change the label of the drop down. Okay, here label to sorting. Okay, so check again. Okay, now label is changed. Now let me do sorting by descending ID value. Okay, see. Now I am getting highest to lowest ID value sorting. Okay. So if I click on ID by ascending, see again normal. Okay. Let's do sorting by franchise by descending. Okay. See franchise Marvel and DC only we have to write. So M is first coming. Okay. Sorry, sorting by Marvel is not, franchise is not working. Let's check franchise and descending. Franchise. Okay. So am I using correct spelling only? So in the service, okay, franchise. Okay, here I haven't added correct condition. Okay. So build the API project. Now let's reload our page and do sorting by franchise by descending. Now see, all Marvels are coming first and DC are coming last. Okay. So if I do franchise by async, now DC franchise coming on top and Marvel franchise is coming at the bottom. So from this we have successfully implemented the sorting for cards layout. Okay, in general we will do sorting generally for table, right? So in this way we can do sorting for this card kind of layout also. Okay, next we are going to implement search. Okay, now we are going to add a search box next to the sorting dropdown. Okay, here. So first let's implement the changes in API project. Go to API project and go to our DTO. Let's add new parameter. Okay, public string search. Okay, now go to our service file and implement the search logic. So here I am going to implement search on the franchise, sorry, gender, like filtering male superheroes and female superheroes. So here what I will do, if string dot is null or empty and superhero filters dot search. Okay. Now here I can add where condition to the query. So superheroes dot where gender dot to lower equals to superhero filter dot search to lower. Okay, that's it. Let's test our API. So in our Swagger, now we can see search query. Okay, I will enter like female and execute. See, now we are getting all female superheroes. Okay, now let's implement the search in our Blazor application. Okay, let me close all these files. Okay, and go to WebAssembly application and open the all superheroes. Okay, here we added previously such sorting drop down, right? So let me add one more item. Okay, so inside of it, let's add the search box. So go to MudBlazor website, go to components and go to forms, inputs and go to text fields. Okay, so here there is a search box. So let's copy. Okay, and add it here. Okay, for now we have to create the variable for binding the value. So let me create a variable like search. Okay, let's bind this variable to bind hyphen value of the search box. Okay, now let's check. Okay, now we got the search box. But let's display the search box like our drop down. Okay, so for that, here for drop down we have variant like text. For search box it is outline. So let's change it to text. Okay, now both look similar. Now we have to do adding query parameter to our URL. Okay, so query parameter is like search equal to our search key. Okay, now on clicking the search icon, we should implement the API call invocation. So here icon is added through adornment icon. Okay, so there are some adornment color. Same way we'll have a event like on adornment click. Okay, so to this event I need to register a method. So let me register a method like private async task to search async. Okay, and simply call this line of code here. Okay, let's test. Okay, we haven't mapped our method. So first map our method, do search async. Okay, now test. Okay, search like male superheroes. See, we are filtering all the male superheroes. Now search like female superheroes. See, we are getting all female superheroes. That means we can conclude that our search is working fine. So next we are going to implement the pagination. Now we are going to add pagination next to our search box. Okay, for that let's first do changes in our API project. So go to API project and superhero filters. Add new parameters like page number, okay, and page size. Okay, now go to our superhero service. We have to implement some logic. Okay, to implement pagination on EF core, we have to prepare skip and take. Skip represent number of records we have to skip. Okay, take represents number of records we need to take. So first let me prepare a skip. So int skip equal to, okay, filter superhero filter dot page number minus 1. Okay, multiply by superhero filter dot page size. So here what we are doing, we need to, so for suppose if user requested second page, then we have to calculate how many number of records we have to skip. So to calculate like that, we have to minus by 1 with the current page number. So user requested page number 2, right? So we have to do minus 1, means page number 1 into total number of sizes. So requesting page size. If you do like this, so number of records need to be skipped can be calculated. Okay, and then integer take. So take is directly we can assign our page size. Okay, no calculation required here. So now let's apply skip and take to our query. So superheroes equal to superheroes dot skip dot take. Okay, that's it. Our pagination applies. Okay, let's check the API. Okay, now in the Swagger, I specify page number like 2. Okay, and I will specify page size like 5. Now execute. Okay, see now we are getting data. 10 records we are fetching. Okay, so pagination is working fine. But now our Blazor WebAssembly application depends upon the total number of records in the database. Okay, for page calculation. So that means along with collection of filtered records, we need to give the total count also. So total count should be executed before the pagination. Okay, then only we will get total count. So to get the total count, what we have to do means int total count equal to await superheroes dot count async. Okay, this is going to return as count async and make sure your count must be given before the pagination. Okay, if you give after the pagination, there is no use of fetching the count. Okay, but how to deliver them to the UI? So we have to change the response type object now. So let me add a new DTO. Okay, so let's add a class superheroes container. Okay, so here I can add public int total count. Okay, now let me create a DTO for superheroes entity because we should not use entities inside of the DTO. Okay, so superheroes let me create a one more class here. Okay, public class superhero DTO. Okay, so that contains exact properties of our table class. So copy them and add them here. Now let's change the return type in our service files. Okay, so now the return type is superhero container. Okay, and also change in the I superhero service. So superhero container. Okay, and I forgot to add the property. Okay, public collection of superheroes. Okay, now in our service, let's change the logic of the return value. So here where db result equal to our superheroes collection, and here we have to return container and total count equal to total count. And now I have to map my superheroes data coming from the database to my superheroes DTO. Okay, so to map them, I am going to use the auto mapper. Go to dependencies and click on packages and go to manage NuGet packages. Okay. And here search like auto mapper and install the auto mapper with dependency. It will automatically install auto mapper also. Okay. So I am installing auto mapper extensions.microsoft.dependency injection. Okay, mapper is successfully installed and here we can check it. Auto mapper. Okay. Now let's create a profiler for my mapping. So let me create a folder like common. Okay, inside of this folder, let me create a file like app mapper. Okay, so this class must inherit profiler, auto mapper profiler entity. Okay, now open the constructor. So here I can define the mapping. So create map. So here what is our source and destination? Our source is DB results. DB results type is superheroes entity and destination is our DTO. So same thing define here. Okay. So first source object that is superheroes, our entities. Okay. Next superheroes DTO. Okay. That is destination object. And now let's register a auto mapper services in our DI. Okay. So here I can register like builder dot services dot add auto mapper type of I can give my program dot cs root class. Okay. Now go to our service and inject the imapper. Okay. So private read only imapper. Okay. And inject the imapper. Okay. And assign the imapper value. Now I can assign superheroes. Okay. Underscore mapper dot map. Okay, destination object is superhero DTO. Okay, and DB results. DB results. Since our source is a collection, right? So destination also should be collection of object. Okay, that's it. Now let's check. So let's check our endpoint. Okay, let's try like page number 2 and page size 5 and execute. And here the total count is 80 and we are getting second page 5 records. Okay, so that means API changes are done. Now let's implement logic in our Blazor WebAssembly application. So go to WebAssembly application. Okay, now all superheroes response type is change, right? So let's create a VM like superheroes container. Okay, superheroes container VM. Okay, it should be almost similar to our newly created container DTO in API. Okay, copy this and add here. Okay, So let's copy this and add here. Let me remove this. Let me remove these two things. Okay, here there is no DTO, but we have superheroes VM. Okay, so now let's change our implementation here. So here, not superheroes. We are going to get superhero container VM results. Okay, now where results equal to total, sorry, all superheroes equal to result dot superheroes, and to maintain the total count, let's create one more variable like private string total count. Okay, so total count equal to result dot total count. Sorry, it should be integer. Now let's create two more variables like private integer page number. Okay, okay, and page size. Okay, default values for these two things are page number 1 and page size 5. Okay, now let's add query parameters like ampersand. So what are our filter query parameters? Page number and page size. So copy this equal to page number ampersand page size. Okay, so these are default page numbers and page sizes. Okay, let's test with the default pagination. Now if you check, defaultly we are getting top 5 records because we are specifying page number 1 and page size equal to 5. So that is why we are getting default 5 records. Now let's add the pagination component, MudBlazor pagination component. Okay, go to components and go to pagination. Okay, here is the pagination component. Okay, let's copy this. Okay, and let's add it as one more item, mud item. Okay, and it's going to take 4 column space. Okay, so here is the count. So this count represents the number of page numbers to display, total number of page numbers it contains. Okay, so for now let me remove this deselect. Okay, yeah, I am adding wrong way, should be here. Okay, now check. Okay, here see, we are getting 4 numbers. If I change it to count to 2, see only 2 page numbers. Okay, so that is the use of count. So here we have to calculate the total number of pages based on the total number of records. Okay, so let's create a method that's going to calculate our count. Okay, get int get total pages. Okay, this is my method. Okay, where total pages equal to double Okay, we are going to use decimal values, so that is why double total count divided by double the page size. Okay, we have page size parameter, right? Page size. Okay, and finally, if there are any decimals, we have to seal them. Okay, so return convert dot to integer. Okay, and math dot sealing. Okay, total pages. Okay, now let's check and let's configure this method to the count property. So where here? So get total pages. Okay, and here it is always should be open the brackets. Why I am opening bracket means if you open bracket, it always executes. Okay, so we also want that only. It always executes the count. Okay, so if I check, see now we are getting 4 because total number of records I have 18 records. So page says 5. Okay, so 18 by 5 around it is rounding to 4. Okay, we'll get 3 point something, that is sealing, right? We are doing seal. So total count it will return like 4. Okay, now we have to implement logic for this. On clicking the pages, on clicking the arrow, next right hand side and left hand side, we need to call the API calls. Okay, so for that I can use one event. Event is like selected change. Okay, to this event I need to find the method. So private async task to paging. Okay, so the selected change is the event callback method. So it's going to input the page number as a input by default. Okay, page. So here I'm going to assign the page number equal to my selected page number, and I'm going to call my get all API call, all superheroes API call. Okay, and here in do search and do sorting method, we do some resetting, that is like page number reset back to 1. Why do we do means, so when the filter or sorting applied, okay, the content must be changed. At that time, the existing page number won't work. Okay, so it is always good to reset them back. Okay, so page number equal to 1. Okay, let's test it. Okay, something is gone wrong. Okay, so we have to register our, here no need to return, just await, and do paging must be registered with on selected change event. Okay, now test the pagination. Okay, now I am clicking second page. See, third page, fourth page. If I implement sorting, it's going to reset. Okay, and if I search like female, okay, pagination also perfectly displaying. So that's it. We are successfully done a complete Blazor WebAssembly CRUD operation, including sorting, search, and pagination. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this video delivered some useful content to you all. If you like the video, please do support by subscribing to the channel, and also please don't forget to like and share the video. Soon we are going to meet with new content. Until then, signing off.